So this is our final debate of the day, race for state attorney. And if the two would introduce yourselves. Ms. Warren, you can go first and just give a little bit of description of who you are.
I'm Stacia Warren, former county court judge here in Volusia County for the last 21 years.
You can do a little more.
Oh, a little bit more, okay.
Yeah.
I'm afraid my time's going to be up.
No, I won't hurry you.
Oh, you won't hurry me, okay. Before I became a county court judge, I was in private practice with my husband, Dan Warren, and before that, I was an assistant state attorney under Stephen Boyles. I started that in 1980.
And
Former school teacher.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. I'm used to it.
Would you prefer to be called Judge Warren or Mrs. Warren or state attorney?
Mrs. Dan Warren. I love that. I told my husband during my investiture that I still wanted to be known as Mrs. Dan Warren. Whatever you're comfortable with, I'm good.
Mr. Larizza, incumbent state attorney, would you like to give an opening statement?
Thank you. I've got 31 years experience in the criminal justice system. I'm a native Floridian. I started out my career in criminal justice as a probation officer, so I worked in law enforcement for 13 years. And as I worked as a probation officer and I went in the courtroom and observed the folks that were in there, the lawyers, I said, that's something I believe I could do. I believe I could do better than a lot of the folks I was observing. So at 35, took my wife and the two kids, and we went to law school. And I say that because we all went. Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. I graduated in 1996, came to work for the state attorney's office as a prosecutor. Did that for 6 years, tried about 65 jury trials, primarily, with the exception of 2, I believe, all felony offenses.
And which circuit was that in?
This circuit.
Okay.
In Daytona and then in St. Johns County. And then went into private practice for a little over 6 years. Ran for state attorney in 2008, was elected, and I've been your state attorney since January of 2009.
We have a lot of ground to cover, so we'll get right to it. You're both Republican Party candidates. It's winner take all, August 14th. Mrs. Warren, or Judge Warren, what is one attribute of your opponent that you think he's very strong in? If you had to say, this is Mr. Larizza's greatest quality, what would that be?
I have to think about that because I've been, that might take me a few minutes. I don't mean to be funny, I'm just trying to think of something. I swore him in and I think he practiced before me a little bit. I think he's a pretty good trial lawyer once he gets in the courtroom. I think so.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
unlike the
I'm
other
serious.
candidates-
No, I'm trying.
No.
I'm really
No.
serious about
And
this. He's a good trial lawyer,
Let me
but I
ask-
haven't seen him try cases lately. But
Let me ask you
from
this.
what I remember,
Mr. Larizza, we're not going to get too sticky on the timing as long as you guys
Okay.
are pretty quick to responses. No speeches, please, like
Okay.
the others. Mr. Larizza, or State Attorney Larizza, what do you think is Judge Warren's weakest attribute?
I think that being prepared.
In what way?
Well, I've seen it during the campaign, saw it last debate, and I didn't think she was prepared, and I think she's letting folks run, or she said that she was letting folks run her campaign, and she didn't really have control of it, at least at some times, and I think that's a weakness, and it's scary.
Judge Warren, I've known you for many years, secondarily, mostly your husband, covering the crime beat, but you've always seemed pretty strong on the bench, no nonsense.
that's on the bench. But
Right, is it
I'm
different
not
on
a
the campaign
politician.
trail?
I'm just not a politician, and I kind of maybe leave too much to other people to handle for me, and that's been a problem. And that was my honesty when that came out on the radio station about. I'm beginning to wonder who's running my campaign at times because I'm just trying to get out there, meet everybody, see everybody. I did this once 21 years ago, but I have to tell you, it's not an easy job to run a campaign.
Well, by virtue of full disclosure, I have Sirius satellite radio, so AM kind of goes out the corner. Mr. Larizza, what would you say is Judge Warren's strongest attribute?
She works hard, especially in the campaign. I've seen her out there working, and she works hard.
Well, I'm confused. She She's letting other people run them, but she's working hard?
She's out talking to people. She's out working and talking to people. But as far as the things that she's running, the ads that she's running, and the things that she's allowing to go out in the mail.
We'll get to that in a minute, but
That's what I talk about, letting others, she said that she didn't know that she wasn't in control. That's what I was referring to there.
okay. Judge Warren, there's got to be something that you can say about Mr. Larizza's time in office in this one term. Has he had one thing that stands out positively, that stands above everything else?
You know, I told R.J. this 4 years ago when he won. I told him that he won on an anti-Tanner vote. People were upset with John Tanner, and that's why he won. Now, I told him that I'd be watching him for the next term, and that if he didn't perform as I hoped he would, then I'll be seeing him. And sure enough, I kept my promise, and he let law enforcement down. They backed him so big. They spent, I found out, between $60,000 and $80,000 in ads against Tanner to get this man elected. And I don't think he would argue that. But this time, the law enforcement is backing me. So ask them why they're doing that.
Well, let's cut to the chase. State Attorney Larizza, are you the Steve Alexander of the State Attorney's Office? Is that fair?
I'm not Steve Alexander.
You're not Steve Alexander?
No, I'm not.
You're R.J. Larizza?
I'm me. I stand, you know, Mark, I stand by what we've
Henry.
accomplished here, Henry.
Yeah.
I stand by the record. Now, to deal with law enforcement, I don't deny that my opponent has the endorsement of the Volusia County Deputies Association and the Daytona Beach Police Officers Association. I don't believe that represents all or even a majority of law enforcement in the circuit. But what I'd like to say is this, that when you have successful operations like the 819 gang operation we did with Daytona Beach Police Department, where 49 folks were arrested and almost all of them are now resolved and doing serious prison time. When we had the Bloods gang in Flagler County and we wiped them out. We arrested 13 of them on felony murder and racketeering charges, something that had never been done in the 7th Judicial Circuit. And burglaries went down by over 20%. Those folks were doing burglaries and robberies to get bond for folks in their gang. When you look at that and you look at the successes like the Beach Patrol cases, which was a monster case to take on, you look at the way we've partnered with law enforcement where we're exchanging information. I believe that there's a lot of positives there. But look, it's a state attorney's office. We make decisions sometimes that people don't like. Imagine that. And law enforcement doesn't like some of our decisions sometimes. That doesn't mean that they're right and we're wrong. See, it works both ways. But sometimes people don't like what we do, and I think part of this is manifested in some of these folks, how they feel about the office, because some of the things we do they don't agree with.
Well, Judge Warren, maybe I shouldn't have given him the Steve Alexander label, but it's been talked about so much in your camp and around circles. Was R.J. Larizza put in office with the support of the unions as an anti-Tanner thing, or because they believed that R.J. Larizza could give them a fresh start?
Oh, no. It was strictly an anti-Tanner vote, because on the campaign trail, I asked people, who even is their state attorney? And they weren't sure. They didn't know his name like they knew Tanner's name. And I'd say, do you remember Tanner? Oh, yeah, he was the guy. Well, then it was the guy that he was running against that we put in. So I've talked to so many people that I'm totally convinced of that issue.
Mr. Larizza, response?
Well, I don't think that this is productive at all to talk about how I got elected. It's what I did when I got elected. I've got the highest conviction rate in the history of the 7th Circuit State Attorney's Office. Crime is down, and the conviction rate is up, and I don't consider that a coincidence. We're charging more crimes too.
What about that? What about that, Judge Warren?
Oh,
He's got some strong stats.
Okay, I want to talk about stats. because I just happened to pull up a whole bunch of them, and I'd be happy to share this later off the record for the people that are in the audience at least, because I know this is going to be on air. But let's just talk about that, and because I'm not a numbers kind of girl, so I can't keep these numbers in my head, so I took the liberty to write a few of these things down. And do you know that in 2010 to 2011, we had over 10,000 cases come through that office? And do you all know how many cases were tried that actually went to trial? 109. Now, look at 109 cases. Some of them included 11 capital murder cases, 143 violent crimes, 1,700 crimes against people. So he wants to brag about his conviction rate. Well, sure, it's a 1.1% of that. Those are his numbers. So he may have a high batting average, but if you never step up to the plate, that tells you something. But I can tell you that my prosecutors may not make a home run every time, but they're going to step up the plate for you.
Well, numbers say different things. As someone that's covered the courts for about 16 years in the county, the whole circuit, a lot of these cases that come from the cops are not very good to begin with. You have to dump a lot of them. Isn't that your reality?
Well, you have to evaluate the cases to make sure that you can prove them. You take the facts in the law. But let me address this thing about the trials. First of all, the Supreme Court of Florida does the statistical analysis,
right,
and it applies to all 20 state attorneys, not just me. Let me tell you that the trial stats are only one part of it. The best part of these statistics is this: that when they come up with the statistics that they're running, 1 to 2% go to trial in all circuits. It's a reality we live in. We've run out of jurors in Palatka and other places trying to pick juries because half the jurors don't show up when they get summoned. Plus, we don't have enough judges to try even 5% of the cases that are filed on. Look, I can get up here and try to talk to y'all about how important it is that while we're trying all these cases and throw these platitudes and talk about home runs, but you deserve the facts. You deserve reality.
Okay,
you deserve to know what's really going on.
I know I don't want to get into the speeches, but what I want to ask...
Can I respond to
yeah,
that?
please, just let me ask you one more question.
Okay.
To put that in balance. Is his 1 to 2% or whatever it is that within a range of the others that are in that?
That's what I was going to just mention
Okay,
to
go
you,
ahead,
because
please.
we're second. He wants to brag about the circuit, but let's look at the state, and that's what I did bring, the entire state, that all the circuits, 20 circuits. We are second from the bottom. And we have 20 circuits, we're second from the bottom. So those numbers are here for you to review. And he talks about not having enough judges. Do you know how many trial weeks we've had? And I've been sitting on the bench for the last 21 years. How many weeks and weeks of trial weeks that are just basically no cases going to trial? If we had more prosecutors, if he would reduce his top-heavy administration and let some of those people try cases, we could try an awful lot more cases to the juries and let the people have their day in court.